Okay, I've been asked about gravy, so I'm gonna make gravy. I made biscuits already. You can probably see the remnants over there from where I made the biscuits. But I'm also gonna make scrambled eggs because a lot of people really like my scrambled eggs, and I probably make them different than anybody else. What I have here is, I'm gonna turn it down a little bit, the grease left over from frying about a pound of sausage, and I'm putting about 3 tablespoons of flour in there. It doesn't matter if it's self-rising or all-purpose. I'm looking at this thinking that's probably not quite enough flour just to get the roux that I want, so I'm gonna grab 1 more tablespoon of flour real quick. I want it just a little bit thicker. I've got 4 cups of, good morning, son, 4 cups of milk that I'm going to be adding to this. I may not add all 4 cups. It really depends on how much grease I started out with from the sausage. I've also got my skillet over here. I've got about 1/3 of a cup of oil. This is a dozen eggs. Got my grease just warm enough that you can hear it sizzling a little bit when I add those eggs in there. Now that my gravy has started to brown just a tiny bit, I'm going to add a little bit of milk. Once that starts sizzling, I will probably add about half of this and let it start mixing all up together. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And salt and pepper really are just completely subjective. You don't have to, if you don't like a lot of salt, don't add a lot of salt. If you need it saltier, make it saltier. Over here with my eggs, I'm starting off with 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm not adding a whole lot of salt. Ooh, I just dumped that all in one spot. I'm letting them sit until I see this. Chris, can you zoom in? Can you see that? How it's all white around the edges? I'm adding 1/2 cup of cheddar cheese. And then I'm going to start mixing these eggs together.
Colby Jack works well too.
Yes, Colby Jack works well too. Basically, we add whatever cheese we've got. But usually it's Colby Jack or cheddar. And you can see I'm going to turn my gravy back up just a little bit because it's just starting to bubble. And these eggs are doing okay. I'm leaving 3 or 4 of the yolks. I haven't busted those yet. I've busted the other ones, but not those. Now, the reason I didn't add all that milk is because I don't know how this is going to thicken up yet. And it's at this point that I'm going to turn this gravy up on high because it cooks really fast from here. And I need to check my biscuits. Biscuits are almost done. And a breakfast like this really is all about timing. I came back over here. The best way to do scrambled eggs, some people mix theirs up before they ever put them in a pan. I don't do that because you'll see why right here at the end. But make sure that you are always just scraping all the way down to the bottom of your pan when you're mixing your eggs. That way you don't leave a whole lot of residue in the pan once your eggs are done. Okay, my gravy is bubbling. It's getting thicker. And you can see how it's like gathering up on the sides, and it's going to get even thicker. Like you can actually feel it. There's a tension in it when it starts to thicken up. So I'm going to go ahead and add another cup of milk. Now, milk gravy is different than like beef gravy or chicken gravy. I do usually make a milk gravy if I make fried chicken with it. But when I make a gravy for roasts or something else, I'll make a beef gravy, and that I use bouillon cubes instead of milk, and water of course instead of milk. Now my eggs are really starting to get done. You can see They're not completely done yet. Those are not, we don't eat eggs like this, okay, y'all? That's just gross. But once I start to see that the majority of the egg is really getting solid, I start pulling as much as I can away from those few little yolks that I left. Those last bit of yolks, I will bust right at the very end because it adds just a tiny bit of extra creaminess to turning off the oven for the biscuits. We'll take them out once I get all the rest of this done. But that little bit of yolk adds an extra bit of creaminess to your eggs that just makes them phenomenal. Gravy's gonna need to sit here for a minute. Now, pepper. Ordinarily right now I would add about a teaspoon of pepper. I'm not adding any pepper to this because my son, Matthew, over there, asked for spicy sausage this morning. I'm not a fan of spicy breakfast sausage, but he wanted spicy sausage, so we cooked the mild sausage first, and then we cooked the spicy sausage next, and I'm not sure how much of the spicy ended up in here, so I don't want to risk it. But you definitely want a little bit of pepper in your gravy because it just really sets off those flavors. All right, eggs are almost completely done. So I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna grab these 3 yolks, I'm gonna bust them, and I'm just gonna lightly blend them into what's left. And you can see now, there's no white that's undone, but there's just a little bit of extra creaminess in here. That's a really good shot right there. See how creamy those are? And that will make my eggs completely done. And the gravy, this is just about a perfect pan of gravy right here, y'all. Grab a spoon so you can see what I'm talking about. See how it coats my spoon? And gravy, the one thing people forget about gravy, they want to make it thick at first, but gravy will thicken up really fast once I turn this burner off. So by the time I get my biscuits out and get the tops of my biscuits buttered, because you can't have biscuits without butter in the tops. Got to have the tops of those biscuits buttered. Then you put the butter on the inside too, because butter is good for you. It's good for your taste buds anyway. But what I was saying, and you can see I've turned the heat off and this is already starting to thicken up. By the time I get the tops of those biscuits buttered, this gravy will be, number one, a perfect eating temperature, because you really don't want it this hot right now. And number two, it'll be thick enough that it'll hold up to those biscuits, because we all know that my biscuits are pretty stout, but they're pretty good. So, gotta get my guys fed. My older boys have a big long day ahead of them. Thanks for tuning in.